Good morning, and happy Mother's Day. My name is Connie Purcell, and it is my privilege to serve as your worship associate today. Our theme for the month of May is theological reflection. Along with yoga and meditation, theological reflection has been talked about a bit more in the last 30 or so years. It is a process by which an individual or a small group reflects on personal experience in light of what they believe to be true. For some, it might be in light of the Bible or some other holy book, and then they integrate an action plan into their life as a result of that. For others, what they believe may vary widely. Through re-examination and more reflection, this process may be the means by which we might change our view of what is true. It is also a way of seeing and shaping our relationship to life and our surroundings, including family, friends, and our life experiences. Theological reflection provides a filter, a lens through which to see what we may not have noticed before. For example, our experiences or sometimes a single event can shape our beliefs or our practices. It could be knowing or meeting a certain individual, or traveling to and experiencing a different culture, or viewing a work of art, or listening to a sermon, or hearing a musical composition, doing service work, or maybe serving in the armed forces. Over the years, my reflections and beliefs have been shaped by travel experiences, books I've read, teachers and mentors I've known, speakers I've listened to, and friends I've made. No doubt you all have individual, unique stories that contributed to the shaping of your beliefs. Our life stories and faith traditions of our parents or families, or especially our mothers, since our thoughts are on mothers today, those may color what you believe initially. But as we experience more of life, we might begin to change our perceptions, and we might change our attitudes as we reflect on these new experiences and insights. This process of experiencing, then reflecting, then integrating is a powerful prescription for personal growth. And we'll be hearing more about it from Reverend Kent during the rest of this month. We come together in community, supporting and encouraging each other on our spiritual journeys, affirming the importance not only of tolerance, but of acceptance, compassion, and open-mindedness. Welcome to this good place, Tapestry, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. It's great to see everyone connecting, and you will have more opportunity to have conversations after the service, but now we continue on. I have one announcement, and that is that we are still accepting sign-ups for the camping trip, I think at Casper's, is that where it is? Casper's Park, over the weekend of the 21st and 22nd, and there's still time, and if you want to sign up, you can see either Caitlin, our Director of Religious Education, or you can talk to Reverend Kent. We have other exciting events coming up at Tapestry. You can find information about those and other events in your order of service or on the website or on the PowerPoint, which shows before and after the service. We are a busy congregation, and our lots of activities reflect that. You can find more information again on our website, in your order of service, or the Tapestry app, which you can get from your app store. Our various groups and events reflect our vision of becoming a transformational home for liberal spirituality and a dynamic community leader in Orange County and beyond. And now Linda Jurgen will light our flaming chalice. This is the central symbol of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves, Also, to be welcoming to whomever we meet and kind to all living creatures. So embrace this light of hope as we share this time together.
Of welcome, here find a vision of hope. Here, be received as you truly are, unique and beautiful. Your journey acknowledged, your love honored. It's good to be together. Welcome to Tapestry for our time to worship. Every Sunday we lift up not just the words of ancient people, but the joys and sorrows that mark our lives. Some do that by lighting a candle in silent recognition of life events. Others write a slip of paper, or you can also email me anytime during the week. I have a couple of notes to share with you from Lauren Schmid, both a joy and a concern. The joy is a thank you to my husband, Carl Schmid, who has worked so very hard to provide and support my choice to work only part-time in order to be with my daughter. Technically his stepdaughter, but really his daughter too, and all in this important way. And a concern, she writes, for my elderly parents, Jan and Reuben Mack, who are both struggling with serious health problems, with being separated due to a hospitalization for pneumonia, and with needing help in ways they wish they didn't. We hold these joys and sorrows and the other silent ones in our heart. At heart, I invite you to come join me up front for a story. So there aren't any pictures in this book, so I got a couple of pictures of the woman that I'm going to be talking about. In the service, I'm talking about some famous Universalist women, but I wanted to talk to you guys about a very famous Unitarian woman. Come on, come on. We got room. Her name is Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and she lived in 1825 to 1911. That's a very, very long time ago. Nearly 200 years ago, a little girl was born in the city of Baltimore. Her name was Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. When Frances Ellen was born in 1825, there weren't any cars, and there were only a few trains. When people wanted to go somewhere, they either rode horses, or they walked, or they might take a big sailing ship if they had to travel very far. On the day that Frances Ellen was born, her mother said, "Frances Ellen, you're the most beautiful baby in the world, with your curly brown hair and your dark brown eyes and your soft brown skin," because that's the kind of thing that mothers say. And Frances Ellen said, "Gah," because that's the kind of thing that babies say. Then her mother said, "Frances Ellen, you're also the luckiest baby in the world, because we are not slaves. You were born free." And Frances Ellen said, "Gah," because that was the only thing that babies understand. She didn't know what free meant. She didn't understand what slaves meant. She didn't know that in 1825, slavery was still legal in the southern parts of the United States, including the city of Baltimore, where she was born. She didn't know that people with dark skin like hers could be bought and sold. She didn't know that children, even little children, could be taken away and they didn't have any toys. She didn't know that slaves had to work all day and didn't get paid and couldn't leave. But her mother knew. "Someday," her mother said, kissing her curly brown hair and looking into her dark brown eyes and touching her soft brown skin, "someday everyone will be free. Someday." When Frances was older, she went to school, and one of her teachers was her uncle, William Watkins. And he said to the class, "Children, you're very lucky to be here and to be allowed to learn." The children all nodded seriously and quietly and politely, because that's what children did. Even though they were only 5 or 6 years old, they actually knew that they were pretty lucky. They knew that it was against the law for enslaved people to learn how to read or to write. They knew that most schools didn't allow dark-skinned children like them in. Frances Ellen and all the other girls were twice as lucky because back then schools were only for boys. Someday, William Watkins said, someday all children will be allowed to learn. Black and white, boys and girls, there would be schools for everyone. Someday. Then he smiled at them and opened his book and said, but you, lucky children, can start learning today. And Frances Ellen learned. She learned math and spelling and English and Latin and Greek, and she learned history and geography and music. But what she liked most to do was to write. So she wrote stories and poems and essays whenever she could. She studied hard and did her homework every day because she knew that she wasn't going to be able to stay in school for very long. She had to work to help her parents find money. Someday, Frances Ellen said to herself, as she dipped her pen into the inkwell to write another poem, someday people will know that the work you do doesn't depend on the color of your skin. People will know that both men and women can write. Someday. But someday didn't look like it was coming anytime soon, and so Frances Ellen decided she would help things along. She wrote poems and stories and sold over 10,000 books. That's a lot of books today, and it's a whole lot of books back then. She helped people who were running away from slavery by sending them money she'd been able to save from writing her books, even though that was illegal. And she traveled from state to state, giving speeches to crowds of people, white and black, women and men, and she told them that slavery was evil and should be against the law. Frances Ellen's mother's someday finally came. But there was still a lot of work to be done to make all those other somedays happen. So Frances Ellen worked for women's rights to help women get the right to vote too. So here we are. It's been nearly 100 years since Frances Ellen died, and many of her somedays have arrived. It's not legal to keep slaves anymore in the United States. Women can vote. All children, like you all, are allowed to go to school, and they can stay in school until they're 18. But there are still more somedays that haven't yet arrived. There are still people who are hungry. There are still children who don't have the best schools. And there's still a lot of work to be done. So just like Frances Ellen, we Unitarian Universalists need to get to work, to get our somedays coming soon. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story about a really cool Unitarian woman, and we will see you guys after your class. For today's reading, it seemed appropriate to share with you a poem from Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. This poem is called "Today is a King in Disguise." Today is a monarch in disguise, with no pageant nor dazzling train. We pass him by with regardless eyes. He looks so common and plain. Anointed he comes from the solemn bier of yesterday, pale and dead. He walks mid the crowded haunts of men, but they hear not his regal tread. The minutes of time, a golden shower, are scattered by his command. Richer than pearls are the diamond hours that fall from his bountiful hand. In the busy mart, where the restless feet of eager trade run to and fro, men count their gains and clutch their gold, but the moments, unheeded they go. The truly wise are they who know the unheralded step of his king, who count each hour with its weal or woe a sacred and solemn thing, who write on the desk of the passing hour some record to be borne above, who endow the moments with living power and transcribe them with deeds of love. Here ends our reading. In this community of care, we make space for the complexity of life, the myriad experiences that bless and break our hearts. We each come to the table with hearts in different places. It's especially so on this day. invented to honor women who nurture. In this circle of care, we honor the truth that mothering is not and never will be quantified in one single descriptor. Mothering can be elusive or infuriating, fulfilling or confusing, commonplace or triumphant. There is room for all in this circle. If you've carried a child or children, whether or not they came to be born, we see you. If you have fervently wished to do so and circumstances of fate made it impossible, we see you. If you love children we cannot see, whether because of death or estrangement, we see you. If you never wanted to be a mother, we see you. If you're happy to mother other people's children as an educator, an auntie, or a foster parent, we see you. If your mother hurt you, physically or emotionally, we see you. If you had no mother at all, we see you. If your mother is or was your best friend, we see you. If your gender says you're not a mother and yet you take the role of nurturer, we see you. And if you wonder whether your mothering has been enough, we see you. If yours is a different truth altogether, we honor your unspoken story. There is room for all in this circle. So let this short time of silence be an opportunity to recognize the Mother's Day of our own heart. It may be a time to celebrate or to let go. It may be a time to dream about the future or to wonder what might have been. In the safety of this community, in the safety of our shared silence, let us recognize the Mother's Day of our own heart. Namaste. Amen and blessed be. This morning, to celebrate Mother's Day, I thought we might look at the couple of the mothers of our faith tradition. We hear a lot about the famous men of our history, about Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Horace Mann and E.E. Cummings and Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thomas Starr King. We don't hear as much about the women of Unitarian Universalism, though. And it's an amazing list. Abigail Adams, Dorothea Dix, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Florence Nightingale, Clara Barton, Emily Dickinson, and the list goes on. This morning, I want to talk about a couple of historical women who aren't the most famous, but two women who are literally mothers of our faith tradition, Maria Cook and Olympia Brown. Maria Cook was the first Universalist woman to preach in America. She was born in 1779. The Revolutionary War was still in progress when she was born. She was 8 years old when the Constitution was ratified. Even in the midst of all that talk of religious freedom and human equality, Universalism was still a really heretical religious idea. And a female preacher was just unimaginable. Maria Cook fought incredibly hard to follow her call into ministry. And her ministry began in 1811 in Pennsylvania. She had a few informal meetings where she called together people who wanted to talk about religion and to pray together. Later that same year, she went to central New York to the Universalists regional gathering there. And because of her relationship with these Pennsylvania Universalists, she got a chance to preach to this gathering. They weren't thrilled to have a woman preaching to them, but they were also very curious to see how it would all go. And her preaching skill impressed this Universalist gathering so much that they presented her with a letter of fellowship. They informally ordained her to be an itinerant Universalist preacher. She was the first woman to be charged with the mission of spreading the hopeful message of universal salvation. For a year, she toured Universalist churches in New York. For a while, she gathered crowds that were actually a lot larger than the other evangelists of the time. A lot of people who weren't even Universalists wanted to just hear a woman preach because it was bizarre. And she's credited for converting many of those curious people to Universalism. For a short time, she was the highest paid itinerant preacher in the state because of the offerings she collected. After that first year, though, her ministry fizzled. She tried for decades, but Universalism just wasn't really ready to receive religious wisdom from a woman. The second woman, the second mother of our faith tradition that I want to talk about is Olympia Brown. You may have heard her name. She was born in 1835, the same year that her only predecessor, Maria Cook, died. Olympia Brown was fully ordained as a Universalist minister, the first woman to achieve full ministerial standing recognized by any American denomination. Among only of a handful of women to graduate from college, she received her Bachelor's of Arts from Antioch in 1860, and 3 years later became the first woman graduate of an established theological school. As a young minister, she took an active role in women's suffrage and was one of the few original suffragists who lived long enough to vote in the 1920 presidential election. Even with her successful ministry, she's much better known in her work for women's rights. Now, both of these women struggled to find their way into ministry. They both had a strong, strong faith. But they came to that faith in very different ways. Very, very different journeys brought them there. For Olympia Brown, religion was sort of an intellectual endeavor, as it is for a lot of Unitarians. From childhood, she was intensely curious, always exploring and learning, and her parents encouraged her the whole way. Her call to Universalist ministry came in large part as an academic pursuit. Before she went to university, she was enrolled in Mount Holyoke, a school that still exists. It was a school for young women. Upon enrolling in that school, she reported that each girl had to identify herself either as a professing Christian, as hopefully pious, or hopeless. The school had a very clear mission to make good Orthodox Christians out of its students, so it regularly invited evangelists to preach at their school. Most of them spoke passionately and fervently about hell and eternal punishment. Julia Ward Howe had grown up as a Universalist, but after hearing these sermons after sermon about endless hell and punishment, she began to wonder where they were getting their information. Is this in the Bible? What was the truth? And most important, how could she find it for herself? And being a curious young woman, she wrote to the Universalist headquarters in Boston for books to help her study the Bible. She would find out for herself what the scriptures said and what they meant. Remember, this is before she even went to college. What she learned from her studies set her mind ablaze with curiosity and sparked in her the question that guided the rest of her ministry. She asked the question, why don't preachers dwell on God's love when that's such a motivating force behind Christ's teaching? Now, Maria Cook's journey into ministry was different in every way imaginable. Unlike some other Universalist converts, she wasn't a close student of the Bible, and she wasn't even introduced to Universalism by other people or even her family. Maria Cook felt herself called by God to go out from her family and to preach the radical message of universal love and salvation. She knew in her heart that the important message was not one of hell, but one of love. And her family was kind, but they did not approve of her theology, and they certainly didn't approve of her wanting to preach. They even thought that she might be mentally unstable. Sadly, we don't have a lot of information about her background because her ministry was so difficult and so short. But this is an important story for us to embrace. It speaks of the heartfelt personal conversion experience that is a part of our Universalist heritage. We often like to think ourselves as a religion of reason and science, and we are, but we're also a religion of knowing truths deep in our heart, without books or instruction from anyone else. We know that love is more powerful than hate, not through reason, but through faith. People come to Unitarian Universalism for a lot of different reasons. Some come for the social aspect. Some come because they're activists and want to be part of a social action community. And some come here because of our theology. These people aren't biblical scholars. They aren't church historians. They haven't read contemporary Christian or Unitarian theologies for the most part. And no one persuaded them through well-reasoned argument that Unitarian Universalism was the logical way. People who land here for theological reasons have made a choice to follow the beliefs of their heart. Through their own experience with the holy, through their own human intuition about the power of love, their heart has brought them to this tradition. And that's a perfectly legitimate journey into Unitarian Universalism. It's the same personal conversion of the heart that drove the mothers and the fathers of our faith to first preach the good news of Universalism and Unitarianism. The faith of our predecessors was forged through a lot of critical thought and personal experience. There's one more piece that led them into their beliefs, and that was life experience. Throughout each of our lives, we learn more than facts and figures. We learn about forgiveness and about responsibility. We learn about courageous love and interdependence. One after another, life experiences build up a way of seeing and understanding our world. There are a couple of great examples of experiences that shaped Olympia Brown's life. We know a whole lot more about Olympia Brown because she left an unpublished autobiography that gives us little snippets of amazing stories. She learned firsthand about the life of one slave, Morgan Elam, who came to her childhood farm. He had escaped from Missouri and was looking for work. Olympia's father hired him, and he stayed with the family working there for 7 years. One day, Olympia asked him why he had left to come to their town. And he explained that when his master had died, he feared that he would be sold into worse conditions in Mississippi. So early one morning, he found the horse in the barn and just rode away. He didn't know where, as long as it was north. She was amazed by this moment of freedom and this journey. And then a new question popped into her mind. "Was the horse yours?" she asked. Morgan answered, "I suppose it must have been. I raised it." Olympia saw this childhood conversation with an escaped slave as her first lesson in philosophy. That day, she learned that laborers are entitled to their products. It's a lesson that she taught about throughout her life. Now, one more example of experience informing faith comes from Olympia Brown's family. I mentioned earlier the sort of religious confusion that came on as a young woman in school. In that challenging time, she wrote a letter to her mother asking for advice. And she had a very close relationship with her mother. We have these words from the letter that her mother wrote in response to her crisis of faith. She writes, "It would cause me the most poignant sorrow were you to become the dupe of superstitious bigotry. Dismiss the subject of creeds for the present and be content with a pure heart, a conscious discharge of duty, and trust in God. I have a great confidence in your excellent, plain, common sense. Use it. Don't regard the notion, sometimes advanced, that it is wrong to use reason in religious opinion." Her parents unwaveringly supported the curiosity of this young, brilliant mind. They undoubtedly shaped the world as she understood it. There's one more note in the margin of that letter from her mother. With these final touching words, she writes, "Don't throw my letter by carelessly, but remember it's from the heart of your mother. And its opinions, if not learned or well defended, are the result of years of reflection." Olympia Brown had the benefit of unending support from both of her parents. Some of us have enjoyed similar relationships, others have not. Whatever relationships we have had with mothers, those relationships, those experiences are the raw material of faith. It's our task to embrace those lessons or to refashion them into something more useful. It's our task as Unitarian Universalists to gather up those varied experiences of our life and construct for ourselves a faith that sustains us. You see, thinking through what we believe, building our personal theology isn't just a titillating intellectual exercise. It's a process of connecting with those things that are most precious, so that when life gets tough, we know what to hold on to. The mothers of our faith were not only smart and charismatic women, but they were brave, and their fortitude was amazing. I told you about some of Maria Cook's success, but it was very short-lived. By 1813, her ministry had pretty much fizzled out, and so she went to live with some friends in Otsego, New York. Just after she came to town, someone issued a complaint against her for vagrancy. Even though her friends testified that they were taking care of her and she had plenty of her own money, the magistrate came and forcibly arrested her. She didn't resist the constable, but she didn't cooperate either. She had to be carried to and from the officer's wagon. In court, she denied the authority of the judge and refused to answer any of his questions. And she was sent to jail for contempt of court. Being the person that she was, she took the opportunity of jail to preach the message of universalism to other prisoners. She continued to be uncooperative with the judge, and after a few weeks of detention, it was such an embarrassment in the town that they let her quietly go. Maria Cook has been adopted by a lot of Unitarian Universalists as a kind of martyr for our faith. Not very much is known about her life. We do know that she was brave and deeply committed as a preacher, the first of her kind. And we know that her conviction came from the depths of her heart and her personal understanding of God. And to give you briefly a sense of Olympia Brown's fortitude, the biography about her opens with the story of her on a cold, rainy day in 1917. At 82 years old, she picketed the White House along with her suffragist sisters. They marched hour after hour in the rain. Occasionally, one of the marchers fainted or dropped from exhaustion, but Olympia marched until the end of the day. She was a tireless activist, an insightful minister, and a woman of deep faith in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So, this Mother's Day, let us remember the women who have gone before us, wise, courageous, and kind. These mothers of our faith built a faith that sustained their work. Let us follow suit and construct for ourselves a faith that sustains the work of our own lives. Amen.
We extinguish this flame, a mere wisp of matter in process, almost as insubstantial as the thought of it. Yet our civilization has harnessed the power of such a flame to drive and shape a new world. So may it be with the power of our thoughts, that in truth and love they may drive and shape a new world.
Would you take the hand of someone near you for these closing words? I send you out now to share yourself with the world. May its promise and complexity set your mind ablaze. May you hold fast to what your life has taught you, and may you question everything. And when you've changed the world and the world has changed you, may you return to this place and share with us what you have learned. Now go in peace, and let the light within you be a blessing to the world.